It's great to be here and also to share the afternoon with my good friend Steve Church. You're going to enjoy him. I know. I can really vouch for that. How many of you have been on the ASU campus in the last 6 months? Okay, a lot of you haven't. Well, you know, there's a lot of really exciting things going on at ASU, and of course you're hearing about them and you're all familiar with Sky Song. But I had a unique experience last spring that I really want to share with you that is still amazing to me. There was a brain sale going on campus. B-R-A-I-N. Anybody ever been to a brain sale before? Not something you commonly go to. Well, I grabbed my friend Mary Jo Bittner, who some of you know, colleague, and we walked down across campus to the biology department, and we walked into a room about like this, but it was more nondescript. Didn't have any artwork or anything. It was pretty shallow. But there were 3 tables about this size, and each table had some gray lumpy stuff on it, and it had a tent card. And the tent card indicated what kind of brains were on the table and what price they were being sold for. Well, we were curious. Being marketing professors, we were very curious about this, and so we looked at the first table, and it had MBA student brains, and these were on sale for $1 an ounce. Now, I had given back an exam just the prior day and was really disappointed in my performance of my students, and so I could quickly rationalize that $1 an ounce sounded about right for these MBA student brains. We went over to the second table, and this table had, again, some gray lumpy stuff, but on this table it said business marketing directors and managers brains, and these were on sale for $1,000 an ounce. Wow, you know, that should make you feel good, and that made us, you know, kind of readily identify with, you know, all the experience and expertise that business marketers have. You know, that price sounds reasonable. Then we went over to the third gray lumpy stuff with a tent card. And this one said professor brains. And these were on sale for $10,000 an ounce. Our chests just expanded. You know, we were so proud of all the investments that we'd made to get a PhD and what this meant and how the marketplace was valuing, you know, all of our efforts. But still, you know, we wanted to kind of figure out how the biology department had set these prices. So we asked the graduate student that was working this sale to come over, and you know, I said, you know, how could these MBA student brains be on sale for $1 an ounce and these business marketer brains be on sale for $1,000 an ounce, and how could these professor brains be on sale for $10,000 an ounce? Well, the young lady got very red in the face, and she was embarrassed and didn't want to answer the question. With a little more probing on my part, she finally blurted out, "Professor Brown, do you realize how many professors it takes to get 1 ounce of brains?" Well, hopefully, I asked Charlie and ahead of time, I said, "Have you ever had a professor here?" And he said, "Well, not that I can remember in a while. Hopefully I can defeat that idea, and hopefully maybe you'll think my brains are worth a little bit more than $1 an ounce." But I'm real excited to be here and to talk to you about this topic, and I'm going to share with you in just a minute some findings from one of the most significant studies we've ever done at the Center for Services Leadership. We're in conversations right now with the Harvard Business Review, and hopefully by the end of the year, what you're hearing now in advance will be, you know, exposed to hundreds of thousands of leaders across the world that are interested in this idea of growing service solutions. But before I do that, I want to just step back a minute and tell you a little bit about the Center for Services Leadership. Matt and Charlie encouraged me to do that. You know, in a lot of ways, our center is probably more well-known nationally and globally than it is in our own backyard. And have you ever had that experience where, you know, you felt like, you know, gee, if I was from Cincinnati or if I was from San Francisco working with this client or this prospective client, I might get more respect than I have by being local? Our dean, Bob Middlestat, refers to our center as the gem of the W.P. Carey School. But yet, you know, we probably could do a better job, and one reason I wanted to come here and be with you is to make you more familiar with the Center for Services Leadership and also some of the exciting things that are going on. And Steve Church is actually from Avnet, is one of our board members, and he can vouch, I think, for a lot of these things too and be a little more objective perhaps than I can. But the center actually has 55 approximately member companies. Some of the companies that are involved that are local include Avnet. We're a proud and long-time standing member. We have PetSmart. I'm going to talk a little bit about PetSmart here today, even though this is a business marketing presentation. Republic Services, the competitor for waste management that's used to be called Allied Waste, that's headquartered here, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and other companies as well. Other companies that have a global and national presence that aren't headquartered right here that we're very involved in include IBM. IBM sponsors our big symposium at the Ritz-Carlton every November that some of you have attended. Harley-Davidson, Marriott, DuPont, a whole host of companies. And what brings all these companies together is a common interest in how they can better compete through service. How they can better compete through service. Now, this could be customer service for some of the companies, but a lot of the companies, particularly the product companies that you mentioned, a company like Harley-Davidson or DuPont, it's how can we find new revenue streams that are novel for us, that relate to us getting closer to our customers and don't require us just to produce and market a product or stuff, but enable us to deliver value to our customers by actually offering them services and service solutions. And that's something that Steve's going to talk about and something Avnet has really done well with, particularly over the last several years. So that's kind of what the center is all about. We operate like a business in many ways. We treasure our relationship by being a part of Arizona State University, and many of the faculty involved are marketing professors. But the center gets no money at all from the governor, from Michael Crow, or anybody. We only get money by delivering value to the business community, by doing things that you see of value, and that's what keeps us growing and relevant. In addition to what I'm going to talk about here today, the center is very involved in management and executive education, doing workshops, doing programs. I was in Europe last month and did programs for Nokia and for Siemens on the very topic of growing service solutions and traditional manufacturing or business or product kind of companies. We're doing programs for GE almost every other month back in New York at their Leadership Development Center. We're taking a lot of what we learn in our research into the business world and into helping companies. So in addition to the research I'm going to talk about, we also do stuff with companies that help them apply this and run with this in a very relevant and application kind of way. We also have an MBA specialization in strategic marketing and services leadership. So we have students that come here and are specializing in this area as well. So that's enough about that. What we're going to talk about here today is something near and dear to my heart, and as a faculty member, something that I do a lot of work in. And to kind of kick it off and give us a little context for this, I want to talk to you about my two favorite birds, the roadrunner and the eagle. How many of you have seen a real live roadrunner? Okay, a few people haven't. I don't mean the animated cartoon. That's good to see you out in the desert or wherever you live, or if you go hiking like I do. What do you think about in terms of the uniqueness of a roadrunner? Anybody?
Run fast on the ground.
Run fast on the ground. What else is special about a roadrunner? Pardon?
Not good at flying.
Not good at flying. There's even some debate as to whether it is a bird, because it can't fly. It kind of almost leaps rather than flies, doesn't it? It also has a very tactical approach to things. It's always looking at the desert floor, looking for herbs and looking for nourishment and other kinds of things. Very, very tactical. Now, how many of you have seen an eagle? Everybody's seen the eagle. A few people hadn't seen a roadrunner. Could you all stand up for a minute? I'd like for you to give me your best eagle imitation. Okay? Now, we always see, like we do in the mirror here, we see eagles flying, so get those arms out. And what do you have to do with those arms? You may have to, adjust yourself next to the person next to you. You got to flap those wings, all right? And as an eagle, you also have to be looking strategically for prey. Okay? So move that head around a little bit. Okay? All right? Okay, you can sit down now. Now, what's the relevance of this? Well, we're going to take a very strategic view on this topic. There's lots and lots of tactical issues that we can talk about, but we're going to take an eagle perspective. We're going to look at several things that are relevant to you as a business leader to grow service solutions in your organization, especially if the basis of your company is your product. What can you do to grow these novel services? The work that we've done most recently, and I'm going to report on here, was in the context of business marketing, B2B companies. These are not consumer goods or B2C kinds of situations. And more specifically, we worked with 5 Fortune 100 companies who are legacy product companies, extraordinary product companies. You know every one of them. But they're also facing the reality of, we want to find some new growth opportunities. And we think that service and service solutions might be the way that we can kick into gear in terms of significant growth. These companies sponsored the study, and the Center for Services Leadership facilitated, and I was the one that led the study. Now, you might say, well, product-dominant companies, product-dominant B2B companies, they've always offered services. Yes, the answer is yes. But what they've tended to offer traditionally is what I refer to as entitlement services. You buy a piece of equipment. You expect, associated with that purchase as a customer, that there will be some services associated with it. What kind of services do you expect when you buy a product? Support. Sometimes people call it break fix, repair and maintenance. Those are all basic services that we expect. Sometimes even training. How can we use this product? How can we make best use of it? That's not really what we're going to talk about here today. It's not that we're against entitlement services or some of the long-standing services of product companies, but what we want to talk about is something newer that are services that I refer to as supporting the customer rather than the product. Okay? Product-dominant companies have always had wonderful services to support their products, but sometimes they've overlooked the opportunities in terms of services to support the customer. Now, we do have a poster child for this in the transformation of IBM. Depending upon how you look at things with IBM, IBM is either a company that is at least 50% services, or with all the things that are going on with software today, over 90% of IBM's revenue is services. And if you talk to them and you talk about their success and going forward, everyone would support the idea that IBM is basically a service business. So we're going to talk quickly about 3 things. Why this delivering value through service solutions, especially for product-oriented companies, has become a big, big deal. What are some of the big challenges? And more specifically, what are some of the key success factors that can catapult a long-standing product company into having great success with service solutions? So, question 1, why is it a big deal? Well, just one side comment away from B2B for a minute. This is a phenomenon that is not just limited to B2B. And right in our own backyard here, we have a company called PetSmart that has radically changed itself by getting into the service business. 12 years ago, many of you probably were here or somewhere else where there was a PetSmart, you'd walk into a PetSmart and it was like a Toys R Us, wasn't it? A big warehouse, and the only time that you'd see a PetSmart employee was when you checked out and paid for your dog food or the toy for your cat. Well, PetSmart was in a very tenuous position 12 years ago. And they had a total revolution in terms of their leadership. A whole new group of people came in. A guy named Bob Moran and David Lenhart, among others, came in. Those are 2 guys that are leading the company today. And they said, hey, we got to do some things differently. We cannot even compete with Walmart, who can sell dog food less than we can. So they started talking to their customers like we all know good marketers do. And they found out that there were a lot of things and needs that customers of pets have that were not being met by Petco and PetSmart and others. And these were services. These were services. Along with doing that, they found out some interesting things about their owners, or their customers. How many of you have a dog? Okay, about half the people here. Okay, some questions about you and your relationship with your dog. How many of you would say you have a outdoor dog? A couple people, all right. In other words, how many of you would say you have a dog that would be an indoor dog, like I do? I have a dachshund named Deanie. Deanie the Weenie. How many of you, at the end of the day, have your dog sleep in your bedroom with you? Okay, quite a few, quite a lot. And pardon the intimate question, how many of you sleep with your dog? Few people admitting, 5 or 6 people, look at them now. All right. Okay. Well, by learning a lot more about their customers, PetSmart discovered that we really should be calling our customers pet parents. Pet parents. And I'm sure I feel kind of that way because I'm empty. I mean, my kids are grown up now, and so it's my wife and myself and Deanie. And Deanie is like a kid, in many respects in terms of, now she doesn't sleep in the bed unless I'm out of town. Then she gets to sleep with my wife. Otherwise, she does sleep in the bedroom, but not in the bed. Well, if we look at PetSmart today, what are some of the services that PetSmart offers? Hotels. Not all of their stores have hotels, but increasing numbers of their stores have hotels. What other services do they offer? Pardon? Veterinary services? Grooming? Training. Yes, I'm proud to say Deanie is a graduate of the PetSmart Puppy Academy. She was not an honors graduate, but she's a graduate. Okay. Now, bottom line, that's what we should be looking at, right? Have any of you PetSmart shareholders? Steve, you probably are. I am. What's happened during the recession? One of the best performing stocks through the recession. And I've seen some of their customer interviews, and these customers say that they're struggling. I'd feed Deanie before, I get that steak that I used to have once a week. So people didn't cut back on spending on their pets during the recent economic downturn. PetSmart today, only 11% of their sales are in services. So what's the big deal I'm making about this? The big deal is over 30% of PetSmart's profits come from services. Over 30% off 11% sales. Furthermore, when I would attend some of Deanie's training academy classes, the instructor made sure that she walked all the dogs out into the store, and then being a marketer myself, I would watch at the end of the training session how many people bought stuff, products, as they were going out. They were picking up dog food or a toy or something else so another big point as to why firms that are product-oriented are interested in services is that by moving into services, it often complements our sale of additional product, okay? And that's certainly what's happened if you talk to Dave Lenhart, a friend of Steve and mine. So there's lots of things that are driving companies, product-dominant companies, into services. What are some of the things outside? Well, competition is driving some companies into services, some product companies into services, because their competitors are doing it. We better be doing it. Also, a lot of product companies, as you've heard and maybe experienced at your own place, are facing commoditization of their product. Customers don't really differentiate. And in many cases, even our entitlement services are our differentiator. So if we want to command the kind of margins that we'd like to have for our offerings, in many cases, we need to have services as part of our portfolio. Internally, a lot of companies are attracted to services, particularly higher-end services, because they're more profitable than their products. And there's a more steady revenue stream. A friend of Steve and mine's is the head of services for Boeing. And Joe told me, gosh, we don't sell an airplane every day. We don't sell an airplane every week. Sometimes we don't sell an airplane in a month. But with some of the service agreements we have long-term steady flows of revenue. So it's a great complement for product-dominant companies to have these services that your customers want. And this is the kind of a clue. I mentioned that the company that we've done the most work with, and I personally have done the most work with in the last 2.5 years, has been GE. Back at their Crotonville Leadership Development Center, I've been there about 8 times now in the last 2 years, working with them and offering some of the things we're talking about here, but more in a workshop format. And this gets their attention. As you know, GE makes locomotives. But if you look at a locomotive and the cost and the dollars associated with an locomotive, and then you compare that to all the services that surround the locomotive, the revenue for those services is 21 times the price of the product. That gets people like GE's attention. Are we just going to leave all those service opportunities on the table for someone else? No, we're going to start looking at those opportunities ourselves. So, second thing, it is a big deal. Second thing, the challenges. Well, the biggest challenge is what, do you think? For a long-standing, successful product company to get successfully into services, what's the biggest challenge for them, do you think? Finding employees and training them. Very good point. Certainly one of the factors. I wouldn't say it's the biggest, but it's one of the big ones. What do you think could be the biggest one?
Culture?
Exactly. A lot of great product companies and even upstart, new startup product companies have gotten to where they are because of their engineering and technical prowess, their focus on the product and what the product will do and how exciting the product is to their engineering staff and their technical staff. To be successful in growing higher-end services, we also have to embrace and get infatuated with what we can do for our customers, how we can help their KPIs, their key performance indicators. Not just make us look good, but how can we make our customers look good with their customers? And that's a big, big change in mindset for most product companies. Well, with this in mind, and other challenges as well, we launched this project about 18 months ago. And we were very easily got 5 of our member companies to sponsor the project. They were very excited about it, very cooperative. We launched it, as I said, 18 months ago, and there was a team of us, Mary Jo Bittner, who some of you know, the executive director of the center, Valerie Zeithamel, who's a service icon, a marketing professor at the University of North Carolina, and one of our PhD students, Jim Salas, who came to us after having years of experience as an account executive, B2B account executive for a major telecommunications company. Now, the heart of what we did was built upon what we call this service infusion continuum. And what the continuum basically says is that there's this array of services that product dominant companies can offer, all the way from services supporting products to services supporting the customer. And on the left-hand side, as mentioned earlier, we refer to these as entitlement services, warranty, break fix, call center, maintenance, all this kind of stuff that has been going on for a long time. And then on the right-hand side, far right-hand side, we call these service solutions. Now, specifically, what we looked at were 5 basic services. Services from this, I apologize, can you all see this reasonably well in the back? Sorry. Huh? Some can, some can't. Okay. Charlie and Matt, I'm happy to have these slides available to everybody, or if you want to even send it, give me your card, I'll send them to you. I'll read them here. Value-added supplementary services, managed services, advisory services, and integrated product service solutions, as well as BPO, business process outsourcing. Those are the services we looked at. More specifically, we found with some of the preliminary work we've been doing, and I've been involved in this area for about 5 years. I had a PhD student that worked on several case studies with about 5 or 6 different companies before we did this study. I've done some consulting and workshops with companies on this topic. So we recognize that in order for a company who is working over here with the entitlement services to move across the continuum, lots of things had to change. Lots of things had to change. More specifically, these 6 things had to change. Customization capabilities, changes to the organizational structure, culture, as you pointed out, collaboration with customers, and challenges. Actually, capabilities relates to people, I'm sorry. Let's look at 3 of these C's and what has to change. And on Thursday morning, incidentally, we're going to be doing a webinar on the results, specifically just on the results of this, and we'll be talking about all 6 of these C's. It's free, and I've got a slide near the end in terms of how you can access that either live when we do the webinar, or it'll be on the Center for Services Leadership's database if you want to access it later, or on the website if you want to access it later. Okay, so here's our big question. We got the cooperation of a senior executive at all 5 of these companies. They in turn got us access to other people in the companies that we could talk to. We had in-depth interviews with all the people that we talked with, averaged about 90 minutes per person. And these are the people in these product-dominant companies that were charged with growing services and solutions. So let's look at some of the key success factors associated with those 3 of those 6 C's. First, let's look at customization. As you move across this continuum and are offering these higher valued services, what happens is customers are demanding, treat us uniquely. We want a customized solution, okay? How many of you have experienced that? More and more customers are demanding it. Well, what's the reality of customization? How are we going to be able to deliver that customization in a cost-effective way so that we can make some money? Okay? So all the companies told us that this was a challenge for them, and it basically revolves around balancing, this is what the customer demands, customization. Operationally, though, we'd like to have standardization. What was fascinating to us is the companies that were successful in doing this do both. Do both. Now, how do they do that? How do they do that? Well, when they're in the customer-facing situations associated with the account executive and the actual delivery of the service, high levels of customization. High levels of customization. But then in the back office, behind the scenes, these companies have created, they don't all call it this, but basically service modules that can come into play. One of the companies we worked with has 25 service modules. And depending upon what that account executive finds out in interacting with the customer, they can combine service module A and C and F to create a unique solution for that customer. Okay? So that's one of the big things that the companies are discovering as they move across the continuum. We do, yes, have to be customized because these are high-end, high-value, high-priced services in many cases, but we also have to achieve as much efficiency as we can behind the scenes. Now, if someone comes to you and says, I want you to provide us with this multi-million-dollar solution, yeah, they might not have any modules. It might be very unique to that company. But it has to be obviously at a high price tag to justify that. Capabilities as a second factor. The capabilities area is a fascinating one and one of my major interests here. And the big question that firms have to ask is, do we have the people power to move us across the continuum? And the 2 areas where the people power get most scrutinized are the sales force and the people that are going to deliver the service. Do you think that most B2B product salespeople can sell high-end, high-valued services? Some of them can. Some of them can. This is anecdotal. We don't have statistical validity on this because we don't have enough companies yet, but we found that basically 1/3 of the sales force can do it and thrive on it, and they're excited about it. And it develops more meaning for them in terms of what they're all about. And it's lucrative. A second third can do it if the company's willing to invest in them, and some coaching and some training and some incentives. The final third ain't going to do it. Ain't going to make it. Ain't going to make it. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be let go. In many cases, the company has enough going on in terms of product sales, and they can continue to sell those products and sell maybe the entitlement services, but it's unrealistic to expect that they're going to be able to help us move our company across the continuum. So as a result, some of the companies we've worked with are making an investment in hiring new account executives, because as we come into these higher end services, what's happening in terms of who we're talking to within the customer organization? Higher level people. In many cases, we're making the sale with the C-suite, and the CFO might be involved. And so We need someone who is great, as our account executives, great problem solvers, great listeners, collaborative kind of people that can work together to create a solution that will provide this, integrated effort that we're trying to achieve. On service delivery, the interesting thing is on the left-hand side of the continuum, the main criteria for service delivery is people who have technical expertise, who can fix that equipment and fix that part or make adjustments in the technology. As we move across the continuum, however, we've found that a second thing is also important for service delivery, and that is business acumen. Because we're responsible as we move out here for also looking at the customer's KPIs, their key performance indicators. So we want our service delivery people to at least be conversant with their customers out in the field on what the customer is trying to achieve and how our offering can help them deliver those KPIs. Finally, if we're not quite ready, we may engage some partners to help us in moving across the continuum. Until we're ready, sometimes these partners are eventually acquired by the company, or in other cases, they're interim solutions or interim partners until we can bolster our own capabilities to enable us to move across the continuum. Here's a success story that is from Scandinavia. A lot of the work that we've been doing with the Center for Services Leadership is with a sister center of ours in Sweden at the University of Karlstad. And one of the companies that we worked with the Swedes is based in Sweden, SKF. SKF makes bearings. Okay, real exciting business. But what happens in a production operation if a bearing goes haywire? Everything stops, doesn't it? Millions of dollars are lost. Okay? So in a way, it is a big deal. About 7 years ago, SKF said, we're becoming a commodity, and we already are a commodity. No one really differentiates among bearings anymore. We have to change the way we look at our business. So they did a couple of things. They made 2 major acquisitions. They bought an industrial sealing company. They bought a lubrication company. They also organically grew conditioning monitoring capabilities and vibration analysis capabilities. Today, SKF no longer sells bearings. 7 years. Pretty amazing, the transformation. Well, what do? Well, let me get it exactly from their website. We provide machinery uptime and productivity for our customers. If you work there, wouldn't that make you feel a little better than if we just make bearings? We provide machinery uptime and productivity for our customers. They still manufacture bearings, but that's not what they sell. They can do a lot more now by adding these added services, and that's really what they're driving in terms of their offering, because their bearings are commodities. Okay, one final C, collaboration with customers. We find that to move across the continuum, we have to get more intimate with our customers. We have to understand what they're trying to achieve, what they're trying to do with their customers, and understand and appreciate what their KPIs are. Now, what do you do? You're all business marketers. What do you do to collaborate with your customers? Just throw a few things out. Ask questions of them, sure. Maybe do some focus groups, some interviews. What else do we do? Surveys? Well, I expect that all of you, in some form or another, are monitoring the voice of the customer through surveys, interviews, focus groups, and so on. That's not enough. To move across the continuum, we got to get in bed with our customers, just like some of you do with your dogs. Okay? We got to get in bed with our customers and really understand what makes them tick and what they're all about. So we found far too little evidence of getting in collaboration with the customer related to co-designing the service, co-developing the service, co-producing the service, and co-delivering the service. Of all the parts of our study, when we shared the results with these 5 companies through several webinars and also personal conversations with them, this is the one that we have the biggest opportunity to move forward with. It's the one they're probably the most far behind with. And they got it. They got excited about it and what that might mean. Now, what does this collaboration really mean? Well, let's take a B2C example and then a B2B example. If you're establishing your apartment for the first time, or maybe you bought a house for the first time, probably one of the first things that cross your mind is IKEA. IKEA. We're going to run down to I-10 south of Tempe, and we're going to get some stuff to put in our apartment or into our condo or our house or whatever it may be. But IKEA does a beautiful job of recognizing that if you want to get value from a relationship with IKEA, you're going to have to do some of the work too, right? We're not going to deliver our stuff, and you're going to have to put together our stuff when you get it to your apartment or your condominium or your house, right? And they do a great job of managing our expectations relative to how we're going to collaborate with them to deliver value to them, to the customer, and deliver value to IKEA. Now, what about a B2B example? This is not a well-known company. It's a member company of our center. It's based in outside of Philadelphia. VWR is one of the 2 largest companies in the world in distributing scientific supplies and equipment to scientific laboratories. Their customers are pharmaceutical company laboratories, R&D centers that are looking at new combinations and new chemicals to create the next breakthrough drug. Their customers are universities like ASU and our biology department, or biodesign folks who are working on latest advancements in terms of biodesign. Now, you guys are marketers. When you think of that as your customer base, scientific labs, what do the people that work in scientific labs want to do? They want to do research, right? But yet there's all kinds of other things that have to go on to have a successful research laboratory. Stuff that's boring to scientists, but are vital to the success of a laboratory. So, instead of just distributing 8,000 supplies and equipment, VWR has gotten into the business of providing services that these scientific labs can outsource to VWR. Things that scientists don't like to do. Well, what are some of these things? Supply chain management, chemical and inventory management, asset management, miscellaneous. VWR will even wash the beakers for these scientific labs if they want them to. Equipment maintenance, instrument calibration, lots and lots of services, and they continue to expand these services all the time. So, Steve, you can relate to this as a distributor. Instead of just being one of 3 or 4 choices to get the scientific equipment and laboratories, VWR has really significantly increased their value proposition by helping these labs in a very, very meaningful way. This part of their business is growing 30% a year and has for the last 4 years because they collaborated with their customers in a more meaningful way than ever before. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Steve here in just a minute, but what have we really been trying to communicate here today? Well, first of all, delivering value through service solutions is becoming, and for many companies is already a huge, huge deal. There's lots of challenges that have to be overcome, biggest one being culture, but there are some key success factors that your own school right here in neighboring Tempe is investigating and having an impact throughout the world in terms of how we can drive those success factors. This is a major part of the Center for Services Leadership, one of our priorities, not only for research but also to disseminate what we're learning. And the big thing that we're doing now in particular is these workshops. And the workshops are not anything like what we just experienced here for 35 or 40 minutes. They're hands-on, action-oriented, with deliverables associated with them to take some of the elements that we've talked about, and particularly this continuum, to change an organization. And as I said, we've had a lot of very gratifying success with that. Now in the short term, what you can do if you'd like to learn more about this is, as I said, Thursday we have a webinar. We're going to talk about all 6 of the C's, not just 3. Also have a few copies of a white paper that we wrote a little over a year ago, so it doesn't have this current information in it, but that's available over on the table over there. It's also available on the center website. Workshops we've already talked about, and of course speaking opportunities as well. So with that, Matt, I think is going to transition here to Steve. Or should we take a question or two, Matt? Or sure, absolutely. Any questions or observations too? You don't just have to have a question. Yes.
What was the biggest challenge for these companies who changed gears from being product companies to service-oriented companies? Was it the culture or having the right people, or they probably had no, I would imagine they didn't have a problem thinking of services they could offer, but actually moving the organization in that direction. Was that more
Yeah. There's many, but I think if you had an umbrella, it would probably be the culture, because having the people kind of falls within the culture. Some of the other challenges are, do we have the metrics? Sometimes what we measure in terms of success, in terms of services, are not the same that we'd measure for a product. The organizational structure. What we're going to talk. One of the things we'll talk about on Thursday is, if you want to grow a service business within your big product business, should you have the services that we want to offer as part of the product organization, or should we create a separate SBU for services? And there's a lot of trade-offs that are associated with that. For example, in many major corporations, the resources are really on the product side. So if you have the right kind of enlightened leadership, they can help fund the services. Whereas if we just put services out by itself, it may not get the kind of support and cooperation needed. So both ways have worked. We tend to advocate more for services as a separate SBU, but you have to kind of look at that within the context of the company. So you can almost have to kind of go through the whole organization. What you don't want to do, and this is not a criticism of our ASU MBA students, but one of our board members, Steve, I don't think I told you this, called me about 2 years ago and said, Steve, we're drinking the Kool-Aid. We're really going to get into services now. And I'm really excited to tell you, and this is a fictitious name, that we've selected Susan, your graduate of 2 years ago, to lead this effort. Now, Susan is one of the best students I ever had. At the time, this is 2 years ago, Susan was 32 years old. And no matter what kind of talent in this organization, which was not a Fortune 100 company, but a Fortune 500 company, we need someone a little more gray and a little more stature than Susan. Susan could work in conjunction with this person, but Susan was not the person to lead that kind of initiative. And it could have been Bill, or it's nothing to do with gender. It's just someone that had the stature within the organization. Steve Church in his career has been involved in driving services, into Avnet. And I think before you had that assignment, Steve, you'd worked for Avnet for 30 years, and done a lot of great things for Avnet. And so you had the command of the respect and stature, in order to make that happen. Good question. Good question. Okay, Steve.
Good afternoon. So I think I would just add to Steve's answer to that last question. One of the things I'm going to talk about anyway, but executive sponsorship is really key. You can bring people in, but if you don't have people at the top of the company, CEO, Chief Operating Officer, they're going to be there when the obstacles are in the way. You're going to have a real problem. The other thing is, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's always easier to make change when you have a burning platform. If you're in a company that's trying to make the transformation today and everything's going great, it's a lot more difficult to convince your employees that you need to make a change. I'm not talking about just this. I'm talking about any kind of change. So it's really a pleasure to be here. This is the second time I've gotten to speak, which was probably a mistake. Usually I don't get asked back twice, but I appreciate that. Or maybe somebody canceled at the last minute. I'm not really sure. But it's really a pleasure to be here with Steve. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but sort of 2001-ish, nuclear winter, or perfect storm for the high-tech industry. I met Steve, and I remember going over to ASU to the center, and we sat down, and Steve had a couple of other people there, and he said, well, tell me what's going on. And this is actually on a slide we can skip later, but our industry imploded. Dot-com boom and bust occurred during that period of time. There was a huge glut of inventory in the supply chain and in high tech. And then there was a gross overbuild of the communications infrastructure. That all translated into an extremely difficult time for us. We made a couple of decisions at that time. One of them was to move to value-based management. I'll talk just a little bit about that. The other one was to move to services and solutions. And we just learned a ton, and I've really enjoyed my relationship with Steve and with ASU in the center. And I think I've been on the board now for over 10 years, and it's really been great. It's all about knowledge transfer, and it's about networking, and it's been extremely valuable for our company. So I appreciate that. So I'm going to go in a little different direction here because I knew Steve was going to knock it out of the park. I actually saw his presentation, and I'm not going to compete with the professor. By the way, you didn't talk about how many executive brains that have to make up an ounce, and I appreciate you saying that, Steve. But I want to go at this in a little different way, and that is this is all about change, and it's all about your culture, and it's all about what's going on inside your company. And Avnet today has a very defined process for change management. It's also all about something that Steve didn't talk about today, but where we actually should have started, and that is in a service company, in a service industry, it's all about having engaged employees. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that because your employees are actually your product in a services business. So engaging your employees is where we should have started. Then we should have gone after being a great customer service company. Because if you're going to sell services and solutions to the same customers that you sell products to, if you can't do the simple well, they're not going to let you do the complex. You have to earn the right to do that. We learned these things through experience, and we learned a great deal of the sort of the body of knowledge about this through ASU in the center. So I guess I go this way. So this is what we're going to cover, and I really already talked about that. I will talk a little bit throughout this lessons learned. By the way, that's our museum. How many of you have been over to Avnet and seen the museum? About half the people in the room. If you haven't, I encourage you to go over there. It's sort of a walkthrough or a history of Avnet. Going way back, you're going to see some really, really old stuff in there with glass tubes and stuff like that. But also, to a large extent, a history of the high-tech industry. So if you haven't been through the museum, we really encourage you to come over, and Al and his team were the ones who actually built the museum, and we've done a couple of others since then. But it's among other things, it's really nice for our customers and it's really nice for our suppliers, but it's the pride our employees have in being with a company that was founded in 1921 and just recently celebrated 50 years on the New York Stock Exchange. And it's a short list of companies that have been on the New York Stock Exchange for 50 years. That's the pride that our employees have that really builds the engagement that we talk about all the time. So this is a little bit about me. By the way, what I really felt compelled to do is to represent the cat owners here today because, Steve talked about that. And this is the Princess Leia. So we play laser tag all the time, and she was tired at that point. This is my son, his same haircut I have, you probably know. This is my oldest daughter, Kimberly, and her husband, Brian, and that's my middle daughter, Jess. My kids are spread out these days, which is kind of nice and kind of not. But I just put up there a long association with ASU, with Texas A&M, where I've been very involved for many, many years. Cal Poly Pomona, where I actually have a degree in biology but spent my entire career in business. I'm a huge Boston Red Sox fan, but you can forget all of that because it just doesn't matter anymore, because this is what matters, right? This is my grandson, born November 4th. So all the rest, I've already told the kids. I still show the slide, but I just say that's the old stuff, right? This is what it's all about for me. This is my little guy, and we were giving him a bath. So anyway, that's what really matters. So just really quick here, founded in 21. Avnet, 50 years on the NYSE, number 132 now. I can remember when I went to work for the company, it was January of 1991. We were about $1 billion in revenue. We had about 1,200 employees, and we were in the US and Canada. And by the way, this was sort of my little mini speech at my 20th anniversary with the company. Today, the company's $27 billion. We have 17,000 employees, and well over half of our business is outside of the Americas. So it's been an incredible experience for those of us who have been with the company for a long time, like Al and myself, and we have some other folks in the room here from Avnet as well. The last 3 years, we've been Fortune's most admired company in our space. We're really proud of that. That, of course, is a real credit to our employees. We're in about 300 locations, a little more than, and in 70 countries, slightly more than that. An interesting thing about our model is we have 300 suppliers and over 100,000 customers. I'm going to talk just a little bit because I can't resist about a new business I started that's going to fall right into the things that Steve talked about. Actually don't have slides on it, but in a couple minutes I'm going to talk about it because Steve was giving examples of how you can leverage what you do really well into new market spaces that have higher margins and returns. And we have a great example of that in a business that I'm very fortunate to be running today. So this is our strategic framework. I'm not going to talk about it, but I have 2 points. One, this replaced our balanced scorecard. How many of you work for a company that has a balanced scorecard? Yeah. So the problem with balanced scorecards is your employees don't resonate with them very well. So what we did is we converted our balanced scorecard into something that our employees could get and really understand. Our employees, probably most of the 17,000, could articulate this just as well as I do. Or better. But the other thing I really wanted to just mention is I was actually Chief Human Resources Officer for 5.5 years. During that period of time, we took our 10 core values. They were on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that nobody could remember because it was just filled with words. We had a global effort initiative that took about a year, where all employees got to weigh in on what our core values should be. So complete and total inclusion. We spent a lot of time on this because a word in one language and culture means something slightly different in another. And this is what we ended up with, our core values of integrity, customer service, which I'm going to talk about a little bit today, accountability, teamwork, and innovation. But what's really important is you'll notice that they're sequential, they're numbered. We want to give as much direction and guidance as we can to our employees. So a good example of that would be customer service is our number 2 core value. Obviously extremely important in our company today, but we will never compromise our integrity even to serve a customer. And all of these are ordered and sequential in that fashion. Let your employees have the maximum understanding and context to anything that you're going to roll out to them. And by the way, the bigger you get, the harder the challenge is. So a little historical context. This is going to go quickly because I really already talked about it. Burning Platform. Of course, you probably know that Burning Platform was a historical event. So we actually got that from an actual event in the North Sea where a platform caught on fire, and the guy in charge had to convince all of his employees to stay on the platform. They could jump into the water. A lot of them wanted to jump into the water. Of course, it was freezing temperatures. They asked him afterwards, because everybody stayed, they were all rescued, no one died, and they asked him how he convinced the employees when this thing's on fire and getting very hot, how they stayed on the platform. He said, well, it's actually very simple. What I told him is, if you stay on the platform, you have a chance to live, right? If you jump in the water, you're going to die for sure. Right? And businesses are faced with things like that today, right? Choices between, are you going to survive, right? Do you have a chance to survive? Do you want to change in order to make that happen? Or do you want to continue what you're doing and die a slow death? Okay? And that's why I like to use that. So change is much easier if you have a burning platform. We had one in 2001. For those of you who work for companies trying to make significant and major change when everything's going terrific, much bigger challenge for you. And what you have to do, by the way, if you're going to change in that environment where everything's good, is you have to paint a clear picture for how things are going to look in the future if you don't change. In the future, what are things going to look like if you don't change? Okay? And your employees have to be able to embrace that vision for a future that won't be quite as pretty as it is today. Okay? So we've done change in both environments. We've done it when we had a burning platform. We've done it when we didn't. But it's just a little bit harder in the absence of a burning platform. It's one of my favorite sayings. I've been using this for years. Everything is changing and it always will. You know, one of the questions I've been asked many times by our own employees, particularly when I was the president of electronics marketing, we changed all the time. Avnet sits between suppliers and customers. We have to change. The technology changes. The needs of our customers and suppliers change. Our value propositions change. We moved into services and solutions. Just a myriad of things that have changed. And employees would say, Steve, you know, is there going to be a time when we're going to sort of slow down and not change for a while? Because this change is like really hard. It seems like every time we turn around, we're making another change. And the way I always answered the question was, if you see us slow down or stop changing, that's when you should get nervous. Because it means by definition we're becoming less competitive, right? And that's what businesses face today. So one of the things we decided was, and I love this, winners recognize patterns using the fewest number of dots. One of the things we decided is if Avnet has to change all the time, we're going to be better at it than anyone else in our industry. It's going to be a competitive advantage for us to change, recognize it sooner than everyone else, and implement it better than anyone else in our industry. And many of you, my guesses, are faced with that. So just real quickly, a good example of this, and sort of ties into something that Steve said. About a year ago, we decided that we wanted to move into a completely different market area. Some of you would be familiar with the term adjacent market or adjacency. So our business has always been forward logistics. So we take technology in the form of products from IBM, HP, Oracle Sun, NetApp, Texas Instruments, Xilinx, you know, some of the finest manufacturers of electronics in the world. We add a lot of value to that and we sell it to 100,000 customers. Well, it turns out that there's a huge opportunity for what happens after point of consumption called reverse logistics or aftermarket services, because the product needs to be repaired, refurbished, or disposed of. Right? So the repair part is we can no longer afford to throw anything away that still has value. Electronics we threw away 10 years ago, we're not throwing away today because it has some asset value. So that's number one. And by the way, in most cases it can be repaired. And even if it can't be repaired, there are components on that equipment that can be taken off and resold or used for spare parts. The second one is environmental. Right? We can no longer put any of this stuff in landfills. So anything, once it's, you know, all of its use is gone, there's nothing left to do with it. It has to be demanufactured, shredded, melted, downstream, and put back into a manufacturing process. Ladies and gentlemen, we are doing that today. We're actually melting these materials down to the base material, and they're being sold back into the manufacturing process, meaning that we're not having to dig up more of this stuff every time we go build some. This is incredibly exciting. Right? And you can imagine for a company like Avnet, where we did, you know, we got rid of the styrofoam cups and all those things, but we're a distributor, right? A service company. Now we have an opportunity to put a major footprint on sustainability. This is very exciting. And then the last one is refurbishment. So you probably remember Apple comes out with the iPad 2, right? So iPad 1 was out for a while, but a lot of those customers bought it just before you know, they bought iPad 1s, and then 2 comes out. It's a thinner profile, has a camera in it, it's a better product. Well, customers were ticked off, right? And the question today, when technology changes as quickly as it does, is when does the consumer buy, right? You've all been faced with that. Are you going to buy this one because you know another one's coming right behind it? So Apple said, okay, from now on, I just did this with my iPhone, when the new one comes out, bring your old one in, we'll give you credit for it, you walk out with the new one. You've probably seen Best Buy's doing that now, Radio Shack is doing that now. Several companies have sort of joined in on this and said, we're doing trade-ins, we'll give you credit, you walk out with the new one. This creates a huge refurbishment market. One of the things we do today in Avnet, believe it or not, in Sorocaba, Brazil, is we refurbish BlackBerries and iPhones, Androids, right? And we know what breaks on them. We change the battery. If it's a BlackBerry, we change the trackball because it's the first thing to break, right? We run the new software. We clean it up, what's called screen and clean, and we sell it. And we sell it to somebody who's probably never owned a smartphone before. It's an incredible business of recovery and reclamation, right? And so this business we have, sort of connecting, the dots, was, $50, $60 million 14 months ago. And I can't tell you how big it is, but I'll tell you it's approaching $500 million today, right? And the margins are much higher in the returns than they are in our core business, right? Because you can leverage what you do well, but you got to think through how you add value, right? And you also got to think through where is the market going, right? So anyway, very exciting and just an application of that. So I already really talked about this, the tech implosion, very, very difficult time. The bottom line of this was we lost 35% of our workforce during this period of time. We didn't get hit as hard as most of the manufacturers did, but it was triage and it was a very difficult time. Burning platform for us, no question about it. But when we came out of it in 2004, we had a much stronger balance sheet because we'd implemented value-based management. And by the way, I would say there's two principal concepts in value-based management. One is not every order is a good order, only a profitable order. And number two, the balance sheet's just as important as the P&L, right? So there was a lot more went with it. Most successful change management initiative in the history of our company because we trained the entire management team globally on how to implement value-based management in 6 months. That was a big undertaking. Okay. So there were a couple questions though. Steve talked about commoditization. Well, definitely, when you're in our business, everything's faster, smaller, cheaper. I always say the only time we really get to enjoy what we do is when we walk out of a store like Best Buy. Now we're the consumer, and I walk out and I feel so good. I say, I can't believe how much stuff I bought for the price I just paid, right? But the other side of it is we deal with with those prices that are going down that translate into that less expensive equipment that does more and more. So it's a challenging industry from that standpoint. And by the way, going into the downturn, we were not creating shareholder value. Avnet was not creating shareholder value. We did at times, but if you look at it over a long period of time, we were not creating shareholder value. The problem is if you're not creating shareholder value, you're not very interesting to the investor. And so we had to do something about that. So we launched VBM, and here you go, services and solutions. Value-based management took hold right away. Services and solutions took us years to realize because we didn't understand the change management aspect, we didn't understand the cultural part of this, we didn't understand, and I totally agree with Steve, the rule of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 when it comes to our sales force, right? And VBM was just an extension of our core business. We just changed the way our managers managed, the way they got paid, the way they got measured, the way we communicated. Marketing and communications had a huge role in this. Services and solutions was a foreign animal. When I went over to see Steve, I launched our first fee-based services business. Now picture this. I was the president of electronics marketing. I had been for 8.5 years. At that time, electronics marketing in the Americas, I was a president, was about 85% of the company's revenue and about 90% of the company's profits. I go off to run a competing services business to the product businesses. Do you think everybody just embraced me and loved me? It was, I look back on it now and I say, what was I thinking? I honestly think I believed that because of the role I had been playing. Like on Friday, I left this job. Monday, I show up in this new one, and everyone hates me, right? Because the antibodies will come and get you, right? Anything that looks like it will compete with that core business is going to, face peril. And that was a tough time for us. So VBM, very successful. Services and solutions took years to realize. This is where we should have started, ladies and gentlemen. Service profit chain. I really learned about this through ASU in the center. That's not where it was created. This actually came out of a Harvard Business Review article several years before I ever met Steve. But simply stated, and it's just a graphic, it says that you have to have engaged employees. Engaged employees who are excited about the company, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, will get you to loyal customers, and loyal customers get you to shareholder value creation. I mentioned Avnet wasn't creating shareholder value. Well, one of the reasons we weren't is we didn't have great levels of employee engagement, right? And I'm amazed at how many companies I talk to today, and I know Steve does, because I get an opportunity to talk to a lot of companies today who ask me to come in and talk about the learnings of our company. And I ask them what their plans are, and 9 times out of 10, they want to start in the wrong place, right? They want to start by going out and saying, well, here's my core competencies. I'm going to go out and tell customers we're now going to sell this externally. And I say, no offense, but you are doomed to failure, right? How's your loyalty scores, right? Well, we don't really know, or they're not very good. Well, more importantly, what are your engagement scores? No, we don't really know, or they're not very good. Well, you're starting in the wrong place. And what about change management? How are you going to change the culture of the company, right? How are you going to get your employees to understand why you even have to make this big change? They think you just wake up in the morning and decide you're going to make their lives miserable by saying we're going to go do something totally different, right? I mean, these are the kinds of things we dealt with and we learned along the way. What is an engaged employee? Well, there's 2 things that make up engagement. It's commitment and line of sight. So commitment is really sort of the emotional relationship that the employee has with your company. This is their willingness to go above and beyond. Their willingness to sell the company, to be out in the community. And then line of sight is your employees need to understand, and by the way, the bigger you get, the more difficult this is. They need to understand where is the company going and what is my role in helping the company get there. Commitment and line of sight. Okay? And if you work for a company that doesn't focus on this and you're trying to move either to a great customer service company or a services and solutions company, you really need to sort of go back to the drawing board because this is extremely important. By the way, my own view, having consulted with both service companies and product companies, this is harder to do in a product company. As product companies for so long rely on R&D and product. Avnet, it was a little easier because we've always been a service company. We never manufactured anything. Well, that's not true. We actually had a long time ago, we had a couple businesses in manufacture. Fundamentally, Avnet's a service company in the service industry. So we kind of understood this. Manufacturing companies have a real hard time with this because they never really spend any time on employee engagement, right? It doesn't mean they can't do it, just means it's going to be harder work. So what is an engaged employee? They believe their work is meaningful. I'm going to show you a really interesting slide in just a minute on some research was done in 2010. They trust and respect senior management. This is extremely important. By the way, all of these things are becoming more important with younger generations, right? I'm a baby boomer. We just wanted to compete, get to the top, make money, take care of our families. That's what we wanted to do. Young people today, totally different. These things becoming more and more important all the time. They have a healthy working relationship with their supervisor based on goals and feedback. I know what you want me to do. You're going to tell me on a regular basis how I'm doing. No surprises, right? They're proud of the company's brand, and they believe they're getting the training and development they need, not only for today, but for what they're going to be able to do in the future. Because young people are always thinking, I've got 1 X and 2 Ys. And I got to tell you, they're always thinking, all conversations with them about their jobs are how they're going to move up in the company, right? It's always thinking about that. And they got to get the training development to be able to do it. Why does it matter? Because they have an emotional connection. They'll go above and beyond. By the way, we also know our employees are our best recruiters. Your engaged employees are out there. They're proud of the company. They want their friends and their family to come to work for your company because they know it's a great environment. It's an unbelievable compliment when your employees want to bring their friends and family in, right? They're invested in making the company better, and they're loyal, so the retention thing. And then in addition to that, they'll live our core values every day, right? And that's extremely important. At Avnet, I think I could say, without hesitation, we hire and fire to our core values, right? And that's how you make your core values real, right? They're not something on a piece of paper. We hire and fire to our core values. We live them, but we hire and fire to them. So this is really interesting. This is from a 2010, and I don't know if you can see it in the back, but 2010 Towers Watson Global Employee Survey. And what they did was they asked people, what would be the 5 top reasons you'd go to work for someone? It's employer on the left and employee on the right, or employee on the right. Now I can tell you this. So I mentioned earlier I ran human resources globally at Avnet for 5.5 years. So I looked at this kind of data, this research, these studies for all of that time. I've been looking at them ever since. Until this 2009 downturn, there was a huge correlation between what the employer thought and what the employee thought. Ladies and gentlemen, things have changed. And I think part of it is what happened in 2009, where a lot of people lost their jobs. Unfortunately, some people lost more than just their jobs. But in addition to that, we're now starting to see the influence. And I think it got called a little early, but we're starting to see the influence of younger people coming into the workforce. And so there's 4 big things on the right there that I highlighted where there's now an out-of-sync scenario between the employer and the employee. Because the employee is saying things that are really important to them are a convenient work location, vacation, holiday, paid time off, reputation of the organization is a great place to work, right? And then finally, a flexible schedule, right? So as employers, and we have 17,000, you have to start to become aware of these things. What's the employee value proposition to not only attract and retain, but to engage your employees when a demographic is starting to change and some of the things that used to be important are being replaced by other things today, okay? Just things we all need to be aware of. My favorite slide on engagement, this is the opposite of employee engagement, right? This employee is not engaged. I actually have another one of these, but it's not as politically correct, so I don't show it, but just a little tongue-in-cheek thing there. That's not what you're trying to create. One of the things that Avnet does, so I mentioned earlier that our strategies start with engaging our employees. Once your employees are engaged, then what you want to do is you got to work on this whole engagement with the customer, right? And one of the things that Avnet does, and we've done this for many years, and we're very unique in this regard in our own industry, in October every year is Customer Service Week. Customer Service Week at Avnet is a huge event. And by the way, it's not just week, it's the month. We actually take the month of October because not everyone can do everything at the same time globally, but globally we celebrate Customer Service Week. So during that period of time, we educate and we celebrate. We also recognize employees for their great work in customer service. Messages go out from the senior management of the company around why customer service is so important. The most important thing we do during Customer Service Week, internally and externally, is so simple, and that is we just say thank you. So we call our customers, we call our suppliers, and we say thank you to our fellow employees. And this is huge. And it's really funny because you can call a customer, and I've called customers, and of course, they'll say, well, who are you? Because, I'm just calling some customer, I don't want to give them my title, but, so, well, and what do you do? So eventually, and so they'll get on the phone, it's like, how come you're calling me? In fact, one woman said, I paid that invoice last week, right? But the fact of the matter is people are just blown away when you're willing to just pick up the phone and say, you know what? We really appreciate your business and we value the relationship. We just want to say thank you. That's it. We don't have any other agenda. Thank you. We appreciate it. Okay? Little things that make huge differences. So this was our road. We started several years ago. Actually, I was part of launching this. We were trying to get to customer satisfaction. I always say customer satisfaction is an attitude. It's how your customers feel about you. But it's not nearly as important as loyalty because loyalty is a behavior, right? We know that in studies, we've seen this over and over, you can have scores as high as 7s and 8s out of 10 in customer sat. Your customer will leave tomorrow for a better offer. You need 9s and 10s to really have loyal customers. But actually, we've now moved to the far right because where we're going now is what we call customer engagement. And that means a mutually beneficial relationship with our customer. where everything we do benefits them and benefits us, right? So there's no more of this, well, let me see if I can do this because this is good for me. And that's those deep relationships that Steve was talking about earlier. He actually had a slide that sort of articulated this a little bit different, right? Really the same message, right? It's all about enabling your customer's success, and when you do that, you're successful as well. So I talked about this earlier. I've been using this. It was actually my quote, but I don't put my name on here because that would be stupid. But if a customer delivers poor service on the basics, I learned this from calling on customers when I launched our first services business. If you can't do the basics right, they're not going to let you do the complex. You have to become a great customer service company first. And how do you become a great customer service company? With high levels of employee engagement. Engagement, loyalty, shareholder value creation. Okay? So change management for us, a busy slide, but I'm going to sort of simplify this whole thing. When I also ran global operational excellence for 3.5 years. During that period of time, we launched change management discipline with a company called ProSci. ProSci actually developed the ADKAR model. Highly encourage anybody that's going through change to think through this. I'm not trying to sell ProSci or ADKAR, but a process like this. Awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And we apply this to our change management initiatives today. And this is where things get lost. I'll tell you right now, and I see this, it's another thing that I talk to other companies about. First of all, you've got to create awareness around why are you changing, right? Why the change, why now, and how is it going to affect me, right? That, with a lot of work, gets you to desire. If you don't get to desire, forget about the rest of it. A lot of companies start down here. Let's train our employees. Let's see if we can give them the ability to change. And then let's come up with some reinforcing measurements. If there's no awareness that led to desire, you're going to be paddling upstream the whole time. The whole time. 2/3 of all change management initiatives fail today. The other thing to remember about change management initiatives is companies do not change, individuals do. You have to get to the individual employee, okay? So this is what we follow. So we create awareness, we get to desire, then you can train. But by the way, knowledge does not mean ability, right? And my sort of analogy there is, how much time I have? How much time do I have? Okay. I'll use golf as an analogy. So you can watch the Golf Channel, you can read golf magazines, right? You can even take lessons, but doesn't mean you got a good golf swing, right? And the reality is, that's what gets lost down here. Well, we trained them. We don't understand why they're not actually out doing it today, right? Which ones have the ability? I think the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is a great example of this, right? If you can train salespeople to sell services and solutions, but 1/3 of them are never going to make it, right? Got to be able to recognize that. ProSci, ADKAR model, have a process for change. So I think I have like 2 slides left, but I put this, I want to put in here for this reason. For this audience today, communication. Number 1, yeah, all these things are important. Training, coaching, resistance management, and sponsorship. You got to have executive sponsorship, but really it's all about communicating, right? And it's not about communicating just pragmatically. It's about getting to people's hearts and minds, right? Because they're invested in the business, and we're seeing this more and more with the young people today. So the actions I just put down here, first of all, if you're trying to become a better customer service company, and almost every company I talk to today is trying to do that, you got to understand that path so you can be able to support it through communications, right, and examples, and success stories. And then you got to be able to transition your marketing strategy from product to services and solutions. Steve, we had a lot of great examples of companies that are doing this. There were communication plans went with all of those things. Because if you're doing that in a vacuum, your employees don't understand it. You got a problem. And one of the things I learned a long time ago about branding that I like to talk to other companies about, and we've learned is, when you're trying to brand yourself as a services and solutions company, you got to do it internally first. You got to do it internally. If your employees don't believe that you're a services and solutions company, you're not. Because they're the ones delivering the service, right? So you've got to brand internally before you can brand externally. Marketing and communications is critical, and here's the real message, and that is that all successful change management initiatives from start to finish have great communication plans. Right? It's all about your employees. It's all about change. It's all about why. It's all about meaningful work, right? And it's all about how is this going to impact me, okay? And this is my last slide, and I have to tell you, I love presenting this slide, and I'm really proud of this, and I know Avnet's management team's very proud of this. This is our earnings per share in the blue bars. The red line up there is our employee engagement scores. Right? So this was 2009, right? And Avnet took a hit just like everybody else did. Pleased to report that things have rebounded nicely. But the most interesting thing about this, so Towers Watson, so it used to be Towers Perrin Watson Wyatt, they merged, right? So Towers Watson told us that the average company's engagement scores 2009-10 dropped from 9 to 25 points. Why? Well, everything was bad news. Whether you were listening to the radio on the way to work or watching the news when you got home or on the internet or watching your neighbor coming over and telling you they got laid off, and we were freezing pensions and we were doing salary decreases or freezes and all those things that were going on during that period of time. And Avnet's employee engagement score stayed at 75 through that downturn and then went to 77. And that was not something that we just did in 1 year. That was work that started way back here that we built on every year. So, that to me was sort of the proof of the pudding that our number one strategy works, and that is to engage our employees. Okay?